Football is full of thrilling touchdowns, comebacks, and legends, but it also has a dark side. Alongside the heroes are villains who dominated the field, but stirred chaos off it. Some were feared for violent play, others for scandals or arrogance. These figures became unforgettable, leaving behind both controversy and legacy. Today, we'll uncover the most infamous names in NFL history, where greatness and infamy collide. Richie Incognito. If the NFL had a real-life supervillain, Richie Incognito would be it. Drafted in 2005, he was a dominant offensive lineman with power, skill, and a nasty streak. But off the field and in the locker room, he was pure chaos. In 2013, he became the face of one of the league's ugliest scandals when teammate Jonathan Martin suddenly left the Dolphins, revealing voicemails and texts filled with racist insults and bullying that painted Incognito as a predator. It wasn't just normal locker room trash talk. It was targeted, cruel, and relentless. The scandal exploded across the country, and the NFL had no choice but to suspend him, branding him as one of the league's most toxic players. Yet, somehow, Incognito found a way back. He signed with the Bills, then later the Raiders, proving that his raw talent still outweighed his baggage. Even well into his 30s, he continued to dominate on the offensive line, showing strength and footwork that coaches couldn't ignore. But the demons followed him everywhere. He got into fights at gyms, created disturbances at funeral homes, and constantly landed in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. His story is one of raw ability mixed with uncontrollable rage. Proof that in the NFL, being great doesn't always mean being good. Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones doesn't wear pads or throw passes, but he is one of the most hated figures in football. Since buying the Dallas Cowboys in 1989, Jones has controlled the team like a personal empire. One of his first moves was firing beloved coach Tom Landry before even shaking his hand, instantly making enemies. Not long after, he pushed out Jimmy Johnson despite 2 straight Super Bowl victories, simply because he wanted the spotlight and the credit for himself. To many Cowboys fans, he is still a genius. After all, he turned the Cowboys into the most valuable franchise in all of sports, building a brand recognized worldwide. But to the rest of the NFL, he is the perfect example of an arrogant and meddling owner who refuses to step aside. Over the decades, scandals followed him everywhere. He has been linked to lawsuits, paternity disputes, whispers about secret NDAs, and questionable remarks on sensitive issues like player protests. A resurfaced photo even showed him as a young man standing at a segregation protest in the 1950s, something that added fuel to his already controversial image. Yet through it all, Jones never apologized, never backed down, and never stepped away from the spotlight. In his mind, the NFL is bigger, richer, and stronger because of him, and he'll make sure everyone remembers it. James Harrison. James Harrison was an undrafted linebacker who climbed from obscurity to become Defensive Player of the Year, but what made him truly infamous was his violent, almost terrifying style of play. He turned crushing, bone-rattling hits into his personal highlight reel, leaving opponents dazed and fans gasping. In 2010 alone, Harrison was fined more than $100,000 for illegal hits, headshots, and late tackles, but he never apologized. Instead, he claimed the league had gone soft, saying he played the game the way it was meant to be played. He wore his villain reputation proudly, almost like a badge of honor. Harrison's intensity went beyond just physical play. He carried himself with a cold, intimidating presence that made quarterbacks nervous before the ball was even snapped. And when the Steelers cut his role late in his career, he delivered one last shocking twist by joining their arch-rival, the New England Patriots, in what felt like a WWE-style heel turn. Fans booed, rivals cursed, but Harrison didn't care. For him, being feared and hated wasn't a consequence. It was the mission. Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman didn't just play cornerback, he made it personal. A fifth-round pick out of Stanford, Sherman became the loud, brilliant leader of the Seahawks Legion of Boom. He was elite in coverage, but it was his voice, confidence, and swagger that made him polarizing. After clinching the 2013 NFC Championship with a tipped pass, he turned to a sideline camera and screamed, "Don't you ever talk about me." That fiery moment instantly divided fans. Some admired his passion, while others thought he was cocky and arrogant. Sherman clashed with reporters, refused to hold back in interviews, and once humiliated Skip Bayless live on ESPN, calling him out in front of millions. He loved the spotlight and never hid from controversy. Even after leaving Seattle and joining the rival San Francisco 49ers, Sherman carried the same energy with him, almost daring fans to keep booing. For Sherman, being the villain wasn't a burden. It was part of his identity. He wanted the smoke, and he thrived on it. Albert Haynesworth. Albert Haynesworth had the size, power, and talent to be one of the greatest defensive tackles of all time, but instead, he became one of the NFL's biggest cautionary tales. With the Tennessee Titans, he showed flashes of sheer dominance, and in 2008 he was nearly unstoppable, collapsing pockets, bulldozing offensive lines, and earning All-Pro honors. That dominance set him up for free agency, where Washington gave him a record-breaking $100 million contract, the largest ever for a defensive player at the time. But what followed was a disaster. Haynesworth showed up overweight, clashed with coaches, and flat-out refused to play in the defensive scheme. He famously failed a conditioning test that turned into a media circus, embarrassing both him and the team. Years earlier, he had already shown his dark side when he ripped off an opponent's helmet and stomped on his exposed face, leaving the player bloodied and needing stitches. The brutal act earned him a 5-game suspension, the longest for an on-field incident in league history at that point. Instead of becoming an all-time great, Haynesworth became the symbol of wasted potential, selfishness, and what happens when talent is overshadowed by attitude. Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger is a Steelers legend with 2 Super Bowl rings, 6 Pro Bowls, and a reputation for being one of the toughest quarterbacks to ever play. On the field, he was clutch, shrugging off sacks, throwing bombs on 3rd and long, and leading countless game-winning drives. To Pittsburgh fans, he was the definition of a franchise quarterback. But outside of Pittsburgh, many saw him as a villain hiding behind success. In 2009 and 2010, Roethlisberger faced back-to-back accusations of sexual assault. While no criminal charges were filed, the NFL still suspended him 6 games, later reduced to 4, for violating the league's conduct policy. He denied the allegations, but the damage was done. His image as the golden boy was gone. Critics pointed out how quickly the league and media seemed to move on, while rival fans never forgot. Even as he played for another decade, racking up wins and stats, a cloud followed him everywhere. To Steelers fans, he's a hero. To many others, he's a reminder of how greatness and controversy can exist side by side. And Ndamukong Suh was one of the most dominant defensive tackles of his era, but also one of the most fined. From the moment he entered the league in 2010, he tossed linemen like rag dolls and chased down quarterbacks like prey. He was strong, explosive, and smart, but his reputation as the dirtiest player in football came just as fast. Suh stomped on opponents, shoved players' heads into the turf, and infamously stepped on Aaron Rodgers, twice. By 2014, he had already racked up more than $200,000 in fines and even faced suspensions. What made Suh's villainy so unique was that he wasn't reckless or out of control. He was calculated. With a mechanical engineering degree and a sharp business mind, he knew exactly what he was doing, and that made his cheap shots feel deliberate. To his fans, he was just physical and old school. To everyone else, he was malicious. Even as he later reinvented himself as a veteran leader with the Rams and Buccaneers, winning a Super Bowl, the villain label never faded. Sue proved you can be brilliant, successful, and feared all at the same time. Bill Romanowski. Bill Romanowski was the original NFL villain, a linebacker who played not just to win, but to inflict pain. He collected 2 Super Bowls and suited up for 4 different teams. But what defined him wasn't stats or rings. It was violence. Romanowski spit in J.J. Stokes' face, shattered a teammate's eye socket with a punch, ripped off helmets, and once kicked an opponent in the head while he was down. He racked up more than $100,000 in fines, but treated them like badges of honor. Teammates called him obsessed, opponents called him dirty, and coaches knew he played with unhinged rage. Later, Romanowski admitted to years of steroid use, which fueled his outbursts and explained the uncontrollable fury that followed him on and off the field. But remorse? That never came. In fact, he proudly said, "If I could do it all over again, I'd do it harder." To this day, his name is less about football greatness and more about chaos, brutality, and the legend of a man who embraced being the NFL's ultimate villain. Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens was both a superstar and a spectacle. On the field, he dominated with over 1,000 catches, more than 15,000 yards, and 153 touchdowns, numbers that cemented him as one of the greatest receivers ever. But what made him infamous were the antics. Owens turned touchdowns into theater. He danced on the Cowboys' star, pulled out a Sharpie mid-game to autograph a ball, and once held a press conference shirtless, doing sit-ups in his driveway while the media filmed live. He was as dedicated as he was disruptive. Coaches admired his work ethic, but dreaded the drama that followed him. Locker rooms often collapsed under the weight of his ego. With the 49ers, Eagles, and Cowboys, his story always ended in fireworks. Even his Hall of Fame induction became a statement. Owens skipped the official ceremony and held his own celebration instead. To some, he was selfish and arrogant. To others, he was bold and unapologetically himself. Either way, T.O. wasn't just a player. He was a one-man show, a villain who turned football into pure performance art. Michael Irvin. Michael Irvin was the emotional leader of the 1990s Dallas Cowboys, a fiery receiver nicknamed the Playmaker, who thrived in the biggest moments. He hauled in clutch catches, energized teammates, and helped power the Cowboys to 3 Super Bowl titles. On the field, he was unstoppable, but off the field, he was chaos. Irvin's life became a swirl of late-night parties, drug scandals, and arrests that kept him on the front page as much as the sports section. In 1996, he was suspended for 5 games after a high-profile drug case, a moment that nearly derailed his career. Yet, his swagger never faded. Irvin walked like a man above the rules, and for years, he was. He famously skipped a Hall of Fame announcement ceremony because he thought he deserved first ballot status, taking it personally when he didn't get in. Still, teammates swore by his passion, opponents admitted they feared him, and Cowboys fans forgave it all because number 88 always showed up on Sundays. His story was equal parts dynasty legend and headline scandal, making him one of the NFL's ultimate villains. Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown's rise was nothing short of unbelievable, an undersized 6th-round pick who transformed into the most dangerous wide receiver in football. From 2013 to 2018, he led the league in catches, yards, and highlights, turning toe-tap sideline grabs and explosive returns into weekly magic. With the Steelers, he looked like a Hall of Fame lock. But then, the chaos began. He fought with coaches, called out teammates, and even live-streamed from the locker room after a playoff win. His off-field antics spiraled, frostbite from a cryotherapy chamber, refusing to play without his favorite helmet, and clashes with the Raiders before ever playing a snap. He briefly joined the Patriots, but that ended after one game due to allegations. With Tampa Bay, Tom Brady gave him a second chance, and he even won a Super Bowl. But in 2022, AB walked away in the most dramatic fashion, ripping off his jersey mid-game, jogging off shirtless, and leaving football behind in chaos. Since then, lawsuits, bizarre interviews, and erratic social media rants have turned him from superstar to cautionary tale, proof that his brilliance and his downfall were powered by the same energy. Michael Vick. Michael Vick was one of the most electrifying players the NFL had ever seen. Drafted first overall in 2001, he was a quarterback unlike any before him. Blazing 4.3 speed, rocket arm, and highlight reel moves that left defenders embarrassed. He became the first QB in history to rush for over 1,000 yards in a season, carried Atlanta to an NFC championship, and graced the cover of Madden, instantly becoming a star. But in 2007, his world collapsed. Federal investigators uncovered a brutal dog-fighting operation run on his own property, leading to shocking headlines that stunned the league. Vick was suspended indefinitely and sentenced to nearly 2 years in prison. His career seemed over. Yet against the odds, he returned with the Eagles and delivered one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history. In 2010, he won Comeback Player of the Year, dazzling again with his dual-threat style. Still, the scandal never fully left his name. To many, he was redemption personified. To others, he was forever tainted. Vick's story remains one of the most polarizing legacies in NFL history. Proof that a villain can sometimes rewrite their ending, but never escape their past. Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor might be the NFL's ultimate villain. A linebacker so ferocious that he didn't just dominate, he reinvented defense. Before LT, linebackers were support players. After him, they became game wreckers. His speed, strength, and violent hits were so devastating that coaches were forced to change blocking schemes and create new strategies just to slow him down. One hit famously ended Joe Theismann's career, a moment so brutal that TV stopped showing replays. But off the field, Taylor's life was pure chaos. He admitted to using cocaine during his playing days, failed drug tests, and was arrested multiple times. He once bragged that he could read blockers' eyes to anticipate their moves, showing just how sharp his instincts were even through the madness. Despite the recklessness, he won 2 Super Bowls, 10 Pro Bowls, and even an NFL MVP as a defender, a rare honor. In the end, LT became both a Hall of Famer and the embodiment of fear, a man remembered as much for his unstoppable talent as for the chaos he carried everywhere he went. Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis was the heart of the Baltimore Ravens, a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, and the emotional leader of one of the most feared defenses in NFL history. On the field, he hit harder than anyone and carried himself like a general, demanding excellence from teammates and intimidating opponents. But his legacy will always carry a dark shadow. Just before his first Super Bowl in 2000, Lewis and 2 friends were charged with murder after a nightclub fight left 2 men dead. The limo they rode in was found covered in blood, and the white suit he wore that night was never recovered. Lewis avoided murder charges by pleading guilty to obstruction of justice, paying fines, and reaching settlements with the victims' families. He returned the very next year, won Super Bowl MVP, and played another decade at a Hall of Fame level. Still, for many fans, the speeches and rings can't erase the memory of that night in Atlanta, leaving his legacy forever divided between greatness and suspicion. The NFL's history isn't just about champions and heroes, it's also shaped by its villains. These players, coaches, and owners brought controversy, chaos, and unforgettable drama to the game. Love them or hate them, they left a mark that still sparks debate today. In the end, The dark side of the NFL is what makes its story richer, wilder, and impossible to ignore.